Okay, I'm going to be introducing K. Andrew Turner in a moment. We first met about 15 years ago and at the Village Bookshop in Glendora, California. And they had a sign up there at the Village Bookshop that said, for those interested in learning how to write, here's a class for you. And I signed up for that class. I ended up taking 2 of Drew's basic courses and one of his advanced courses. And we started going to a writing critique group long after that. And that was the basis of a very long-standing friendship between us. And through that time, I began to see that Drew was involved in so many other things, you know, that he would teach workshops and things like how to overcome writer's block and so on. Anyway, K. Andrew Turner writes queer literary and speculative prose and poetry. In 2013, he founded the East Jasmine Review, an electronic literary journal. He was a semifinalist for the 2016 Luminaire Award in poetry. His works include Heart, Mind, Blood, Skin, and Gymlationship. I'm not sure exactly what Gymlationship, I haven't read that one. But I've read a number of his books. He's an extremely good writer in whatever he chooses to touch. And so I introduce him now. K. Andrew Turner, or Drew Turner, to his friends.
Thank you, Jim. That was wonderful. Sorry, I have a lot of props with me today.
We'll get there. I just hope I don't fall over.
Okay, so I'm not sure if Mike did you post the description of the class? Okay, so we're going to be going over flash fiction today, and I wanted to start with a quick question. What is flash fiction? Does anybody want to raise their hand and tell me what it is? Yes.
Yes. About either depending on who is publishing, but usually about 1,000 words or less or 1,500 words or less.
That's about right. So flash fiction is exactly what he said. It's about 1,000 words or less. Some places say 500 words or less as well. There's also another subset under flash fiction called microfiction, which is about 50 to 100 words. And I will probably be reading one of those for you today. So another question is, what do we expect to find in flash fiction? Does anyone want to? Okay, so we're expecting basically to find in flash fiction the same things we find in short stories, in novels, trilogies, sagas. We're looking for the exact same thing: characters, setting, so many other things, but my brain is a little bit slow today. So we're basically looking for the exact same thing: characters, setting, plot, dialogue, all sorts of different things, description. We need all of that in flash fiction. The only thing is we're taking it, we're kind of putting it into a little compaction to make it a lot shorter. One question that people sometimes ask is, why do we want to write flash fiction? The main thing is you can read it, your readers can read it in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, depending on how long it is. So it's very easy to digest as a reader. You can write something real quick. As a writer too, you can knock out, I think most of us here have been writing for a long time, you can knock out 100 words, 200 words, 1,000 words, probably in 30 minutes, maybe an hour. For most of us, maybe a little bit longer. I mean, we're talking first drafts here, not editing. So writing these things is very quick, and today we're going to at least get some stuff on the page. So I hope everybody here, it looks like everybody here has pen and paper, which is perfect. Another thing that you can do in flash fiction is you can write small pieces of flash fiction and stitch them all together to write a longer piece. This is usually called like a novella in Flash, novel in Flash, where you maybe put in 40, 50 pieces together to create a longer work, but each story kind of stands on its own. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences between flash fiction and other types of longer fiction. So with a short story, we have time to develop a couple scenes. So it was Tom who was up here, right?
Yes.
Tom, yeah. So Tom was up here reading his story, and if you kind of want to think back on that, there's more than one scene there, right? There's about, I think, 3 or 4 scenes in that story. And we have time for that in a shorter story. But in a flash fiction, we may only have time for one scene. Because once you get past that, it's kind of the next piece in the fiction, in the flash fiction. And with novels, we're again talking about fiction here. Novels have a lot more time even than short stories. So we have, a chapter could be a short story where there's 2, 3 scenes in a chapter, and then you have, 30, 40 chapters in a book. So you can kind of see how you can kind of take these longer works, kind of crunch them down into thinking about them as flash fiction. So as you've been reading or writing, you can think, oh, maybe the first chapter of my book that I've been working on, it's about 750 words, maybe 1,000 words, the first scene of it, that could be a piece of flash fiction. So you can kind of think of these as flash fiction, what we're learning today, as kind of building blocks for longer pieces as well. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the key elements of flash fiction. The obvious first one is brevity. We want to write something that's very short, obviously. We need to be concise in our writing. So this is going to be sometimes difficult for people who are used to writing in longer works. And the hardest thing is do not explain anything. Don't explain anything in flash fiction. You don't have time. You don't have the words on the page to do it. You just got to trust your reader to kind of follow you along. I know that some people here also write poetry, so if you're a poet, you already have a step ahead of people who don't do poetry or don't write short fiction. The reason is, like poetry, flash fiction, every word on the page matters. So the poets here, they crossing off words all the time, so if you're a poet here, you got a leg up ahead of everybody else, which is okay. I'm a poet too. One of the difficult things with the short form is you have to take these complex story ideas and really kind of squeeze them down into very little bit. So this kind of goes into the not explaining. You want to guide your readers to the conclusion you want to get them to without telling them that conclusion, because you also may not have time to really make a nice long resolution and kind of tie things up with a nice bow. You may only have a sentence, 3 or 4 words to do that. So you want to use your words to guide the readers toward the end. And if they get a different ending than you intended, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, as readers, we've all maybe read the same book or the same story and come up with different conclusions, so it's perfectly fine. And sometimes you'll be surprised at the things that they come up with. You're like, I didn't intend that, but hey, that works. Let's see. So I'm going to go into the next part, which is the structure of flash fiction. So again, this is going to be very similar to short stories. So if you're kind of similar with how like normal fiction works, paragraphs, dialogue, quotation marks, things like that, it's going to be pretty much the same. However, there's going to be a little bit different things. There's different types of flash fiction. Narrative is going to be more traditional story. It could be a little bit poetic because this form can kind of push over into prose poetry. So you can kind of make it a little bit more poetic if you'd like to. That'll add a little bit more emotion to it. You can do vignettes, which are very short, little slice of life type things, so you don't have a full story. You just have a little piece of somebody's life that was very important to them. And so if you kind of think, the way I like to think of vignettes is our entire lives are full of little flash fictions where We're kind of doing the same thing every day, going to work, making dinner, eating food, going to bed. And then there's always that, it's like for me, this would be a piece of flash fiction where I'm standing in front of an audience talking, because this for me is a little bit different than the ordinary, right? So flash fiction can be a little bit different than the ordinary, and you can take those moments and make them shine. And I think Tom did a pretty good example in some of those things. He's taking some ordinary days, but there's a lot of emotionality. And then I'm using you as an example because you're fresh in mind of what we all just listened to, so thank you for reading. So with narrative forms, we want to think of very compact plots. So it's going to be very simple things. You know, there's no world saving. You know, we don't have all this expansive place to do it. But we still want to do point of view, all that stuff as well is going to be in there. The next part I'll talk about is characterization. It's going to be very similar to, of course, the other longer forms of fiction. But the things that I kind of want to highlight is characters who are yearning for something, that really want something right now, is going to be helpful to kind of push that story out. The other thing too is the characters have to be doing something pretty much immediately. On the first page, the first sentence, they have to be doing something. Let's see. I'll talk a little bit about the conflict and resolution. I think I talked about resolution a little bit earlier. This is, again, we're thinking in terms of like small tensions, so you can think of like family relationships, friend relationships, things that are already kind of there, but there's a little bit of a twist there at that moment. And again, resolutions can be hinted at, they can be pushed off the page. You can kind of let your reader think about the story. So one thing I really like to do with flash fiction is think about what I want the reader to leave with, right? And what kind of emotion I want them to leave with. And if they're thinking about the story for longer than you wrote it, or longer than the words on the page, you're doing great. You want to leave them with something that they can feel like they had a full meal, even though it's just a little bite-sized snack. All right, so there's just a couple more things, and we'll hopefully we'll be doing a little bit of writing here in just a second. I'd just like to go over some stuff first so we can get a nice little idea. Again, the poets already kind of know this, but the word choice is probably going to be one of the most important things in flash fiction. We have to use the power of precise, evocative language. So this is using really powerful verbs and kind of embodied language. So really pay attention to the words you're using. You know, if you're using adverbs, you can take those out and change your verb. That saves you a word, maybe two. And again, every single word on that page matters. It's very important. All right, so the last thing we'll do is to talk about some revision strategies, because when you're writing the first time, you know, I don't say like do all these things right at the first time. No one can. So with the revision, what I'd like you to think about as you're revising your pieces, say it one time. So a lot of us will be like, oh, you know, she walked over to this, she walked over to that, or, you know, she was so mad and then she yelled at him. One. Just say it one time, because that leaves you more space to add more to the story. So we want to only say things as few times as we can. The other thing too with flash fiction is you can think your readers are smart. Again, if we're talking about 1,000 words, that's 4 pages, double spaced, printed out. That's not a lot of time to read. So trust that your readers are smart. They can always go back and reread it again, because it doesn't take a lot of time. So trust your readers to be smart. Don't explain anything to them. Unless it's absolutely necessary, but again, I don't think it is. The other thing you can do is rely on experiences that you've had and experiences that other people have had. Like every single person in this room has had the experience of eating food and drinking stuff. So we don't need to go into a lot of that in flash fiction. There's a lot of shared experiences we have as Americans. A lot of us remember certain events. We have a very shared culture. You can use those shared experiences to truncate and let them fill in the blanks on that area. This one is probably the hardest, and this is probably why I keep mentioning it, is be okay with being vague. Being vague on the paper. Be okay with being vague, because that will leave the readers to kind of fill in the blanks on their own. Okay, I'm going to read a piece of microfiction that I got published in Microfiction Monday a long time ago. And I think it's exactly 100 words, so it's a very short one. Just so you can kind of see what you can do in 100 words. And this is called Never Forget the Dark. Oh yeah, also titles can be very important for flash fiction, because you can, as poets know too, you can use the title as part of the story or to give a little bit of information. So Never Forget the Dark. Say we had stayed, the open blue sky always ready to devour us, our dreams. The lumpy couch you found on the side of 2nd Street in November during the riots, how it crinkled under us, or your arms failing to bring me any warmth. There were the stars, your crooked finger pointing out their beauty, their ugly stories. Even your smile, so dazzling, kept me entranced for only so long. Yet you always ask, what if? 2 words you sought to bring peace, words I used to imagine freedom, to believe there was better out there for you, too. So, that's 100 words. So the reason I like to read this is there's a lot of stuff in there, and I could go pick it apart for 20 minutes, but it only took me 1 minute to read. So, or less. So you can see the stuff I was talking about. I like to read an example just so you can see why, like how all these things tie together is, you know, I say November, we know what November is. We kind of get a piece of cold, or that kind of cold breeze. So I just like to do a little bit of that. So we got some more time, right?
Yeah. If you want, we can take a short break and then come back and do the workshop.
Yes, because the next thing is going to be doing the writing piece, and I would like to kind of do the writing and then go into that. So I think taking a break now would be the best time. My hips do lie. I'm not Shakira.
I could do that.
Okay, so what I'd like to do now is we're going to kind of settle down for a second, and I'm going to read through some prompts. If you have a particular prompt, I don't mind rereading them several times, because I know sometimes it's hard to hear them and think of the ones that you want to do. So I'm going to read a couple prompts, and this is just to kind of get the juices flowing for today. You can go with that story, you can write it for the anthology, you can just do it for fun, see if it comes into anything, maybe take another prompt later and do that one instead. So feel free to mix and match, do what you want here. So I'm going to start reading a couple prompts just to kind of get the brain juices going now that we've had our coffee. All right. The one thing I want to mention, at least for today's exercise, is please have at least 2 characters in your story. The reason is it's going to be a little bit easier to work with 2 characters, kind of either opposing each other, working together, something like that, than just one person kind of thinking or talking. So please have at least 2 characters in today's prompts. So the first one is going to be write a story in first person about a place you know well. The next one is, and you can pick any of these. Imagine a moment from the past week you've experienced. Dramatize that moment. What's important? What's not? Pick an article of clothing or an object, can be anything, and use that to spur the creativity of a vignette with that article or object appearing and creating something of greater meaning. So maybe it's like a pen, and what does that pen mean? So that's kind of the idea of that one. And then the last one I have is write about two characters yearning. They should have some type of relationship, whether it's family, friendship, a romantic one, coworkers, schoolmates, and their yearning should be in opposition to each other. So I just want to give you those 4 to start. Did anybody want me to repeat them? Okay, I'll go ahead and repeat them again. Write a story in first person about a place you know well. Imagine a moment from the past week. Dramatize that moment and think about what's important and what's not, so you can think about maybe telling a story to a friend. Pick an article of clothing or an object and use that to create a vignette with that object appearing and creating something of greater meaning. And then the last one is two characters yearning and in opposition to each other, and they need to be in some type of relationship, whether it's friendship, family, romantic, schoolmates, co-workers, anything like that. Any repeats on that again? We're going to do this for about, 10 minutes. We're going to write for 10 minutes.
Pick one of them.
You pick one of them, and we're going to write for about 10 minutes. Write as much as you can. Don't worry about it being good. If you have not done, oh gosh, I can't remember now. I would like you to not edit if possible. Just try to continuously write on the page for 10 minutes. Don't worry about it being good, because you can always edit it later. If there's no questions for this particular exercise, we'll go ahead and start, and we'll come back at 11:30, so we'll take about 10 minutes. And I'll be wandering around the room, so if you have a question, just raise your hand, I'll come up to you. So what I would like to do now is, I think we have a little bit of time, so I want to see if we can get we'll see if we have time for 3, but I'm going to see if we can get a couple volunteers to read what they wrote, and we'll kind of discuss their work briefly. All right.
See you later. Title. Warm and fuzzy, maybe, but too frisky to know. Won't stay still enough. Won't sleep, snorting, barking, wiggling, grunting, slobbering. Cute, some say, but that's all hype. He's the most monstrous looking pet we've ever seen. Bad eyes, frog the moments he is too tired to wiggle, but is still out of reach. Untamable, sadly, so must be rehoused. Should have been matched better. First family wanted to replace Roscoe, a tamer breed who easily adapted to outdoor living. Too many catch basin pads caused physical pain to newbie family. Incessant barking disrupted sleep regularly. Sickly nature burdened budget, so off he goes to a better match. Video and still photos cause brief smiles, praying he and new family adjust well. Slobber stains remind of the months we tried to bond. Frenchie. Be a good dog, Frenchie.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about this piece first. So what works with this piece? You can just raise your hand and I'll call on you.
A lot of descriptions about the animal that are very strong. It puts the character of the animal right there.
Anybody else?
It was very relatable to anyone who's interacted with dogs or felt like a misfit.
Dog lovers.
Anything else? Anything particularly, like, think about character, setting, point of view? Yes.
It wasn't all positive.
Right.
You know, it wasn't like she was giving us a rosy picture. There was more tension involved. The impact the dog had on it.
So I'm gonna take out, let's think, because this is of course first draft. So what would we want to improve on or change in this story? Anybody? Don't be shy. We're all nice people here.
We don't know.
I would like to know if this person was going to keep the dog or this person was describing a dog that they were now taking on. Like, I wasn't quite sure if this was like, I've taken this dog that's been unwanted, or now I don't want this dog
Yeah,
anymore.
that's right.
One thing I'll mention just for you is you had a lot of emotion in your body that was not on the page.
Yeah.
Put that on the page.
Okay.
Because you were shaking, you were tearing up, your throat was constricting, put that in the story. This is a great example. If you're going to write emotion like this, you want to feel the shaking as the reader. Yeah. Any other improvements we want to talk about on this one? Yes, Jim.
Setting could, a little more detail in the setting,
Mhm.
even shorter would help. I forgot the other thing.
Yeah, so I think this is a good point, especially with something so short. It's hard to give place, but you can do that real quick. Like, is it a house? Is it an apartment? Is it a shelter that you're at? Is it a parking lot? You can get that in just 2-3 words. So I think these are good suggestions that we had. Okay, I think you wanted to come up?
Yeah.
And then I think we might have time for one more. You in the back can come up after.
Hi, I'm Geisha Williams, and the title is A Well-Liked Kid. Your dog, the girl behind who tormented me all of the 4th grade thus far, grabbed me by the neck and forced me to my knees on the urban asphalt playground. Bark, bark like the dog you are. I scrabbled around and looked up to try to get the attention of an adult, any adult nearby. Instead, I suffered at least several weeks of the classmates' abuse. Our teacher, who'd been on strike, came back and my mom arranged a meeting with him. I told him how not only had one girl bullied me, but several kids had ganged up on me and forced me to wear a collar. My teacher looked me in the eye and said, "Oh, that just means they like you."
Thank you. So what works really great in this story?
Her voice, her diction, and her presentation.
And every woman in the room has been in that place.
Anybody else have anything? Yeah. One thing I wanted to point out is the very first paragraph. We're right there in the story.
Yeah.
I can feel the gravel on my knees from the asphalt. I can feel that. That's fantastic. It's fantastic. Exactly what we want. Is there any improvements we can do? Yes.
It was a little short.
Yeah.
I wanted it stretched out a little bit more,
She got the idea of it, though.
especially with the teacher.
But isn't that what we want?
We do want short. So
We want to be thinking about it later.
So one thing that's interesting to me with this piece is we have the bully in the moment, and then we have everything thinking afterwards. So I think what would be most interesting is cutting out the weeks apart and just saying, like, here's the moment, does that teacher come or not, what comes of it? And really either sticking in that moment at the beginning or sticking in the moment at the end.
Okay.
Which one is more important? Does that kind of make sense to everyone here why I'm saying that?
Yeah.
Especially for flash fiction, we want to pick one of those two moments because there's that bridge in between And if you take that bridge in between, you want it, you can make it into a larger piece, like a piece of like a short story or something like that. But if you want to do flash fiction, you want to pick one or the other.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Sir? And this will be our last one, and then we'll leave it open for questions. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great, yeah.
I like to do these examples just so you can kind of see what people come up with. It's a lot of fun.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Carrion. I didn't write a title because I was so busy and worried about, not worried, but I was wanting to hurry up and do the story. And I usually do it that way and then come up with a title afterwards or sometime during the story. Frank held the gun to Emily's head, his hand shaking, blood streaming from his head, stinging in his eyes. Frank, wait, this is not how it looks. Trotter took the diamonds. He left me out in the cold, or out in the lurch too. You lying bitch. You would say anything to save your skin. Frank, you gotta believe me. If I had only known, immediately the front door swung open. Frank and Emily looked to the door and both are surprised to see Mr. Trotter standing at the door, wobbling, then falling on his face to the marble floor. The black velvet bag falling and sliding on the floor.
Thank you. Okay, what works really great in this story?
The opening.
The opening, yeah.
We're right there in the moment. I have no idea what's happening, but I have context, right? There's blood on his face, there's a gun, they're talking about something that obviously just happened. So we get a little bit of context of the past from what they're saying, which is really, really interesting. So I like that start in the middle and right in the middle of the action. Anything else that we like? Anything else that we like from this story that he did well? The ending? There's a little bit of mystery at the ending, like who's this guy? Why is he coming in? He must have obviously been involved with this heist or robbery. There's the velvet bag, there's the gems coming on the floor. It's really, really interesting.
It definitely leaves you wanting to know more of the story.
Mhm.
It's almost like a trailer.
Yeah. What are some places we could find some improvement? Yes.
Well, it's pretty short. I thought there was gonna be more, I don't know, more of something, you know, just, I mean, the opening was very abrupt. We didn't know the names of the people, he named the characters, which I thought was interesting. It just seemed like it just got started and then it just stopped.
Yeah. I'll tell you what that is. Cut the dialogue in half. Take out half the dialogue. You don't need that much. And then you can use that space to fill in some of those blanks that he's asking for. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh, yeah.
And
One
then-
thing that I thought about too was a little bit, not much, but maybe a sentence about a little bit of backstory.
Yeah, and you don't have to put that right at the beginning, you can put that in the middle. Because I think starting right there is really interesting, at least an interesting place. I think a little bit more setting might be fun. That's not me. It's a ringtone that I know, though. Any other spots for improvement in the story? I like to make you guys think. This the one reason I love doing these workshops is you write, you get the lecture, you write, you read, and you pick apart other people's works, or in your head at least, so you can kind of do the practical applications. I think it's really great. A great thing. Thank you so much for coming here. Thank you for all the volunteers for reading. I appreciate that. We had some really excellent pieces. So, and how long did this take? 10 minutes. So, there was Anita, you were talking about the write-in that you do. You could write 5 pieces in that time. You have 15 minutes to write that. So, you know, if you ever feel like I don't have enough time to write, I have something exercises up here. I put 2 bonuses up here, so if you want, you can come take a picture of it or write some of them down. Mike also has my email, so if you want, I can email you the prompts, and you can distribute them to the group if you'd like. But these are just, anytime you need them, you can use them type of things. And just think 10 minutes, what can I write in 10 minutes? Most of the stories that we got here today are probably about 50 to 100 words, so they are a little bit on the shorter side. You can probably get away with making them a little bit longer. But I think just for an exercise, it's a really fun place to start and think about what's working, what's not working in the story. So I think we want to move over to questions.
We can do that. And we can have people read to each other at the tables. It's up to you.
We got about 15 minutes, so I want to make sure that anybody who has any questions for me, we have time for that.
Do that first.
Yeah, so if anybody has questions, let me know about like flash fiction in general, what we talked about, and if not, then maybe we can break out into groups and do a little bit of that for the last bit. Yes?
So how did you actually get into flash fiction?
I got into it because it's really hard for me to write longer fiction. So taking 10 minutes to write a story and keep it all in my head in one day is really nice. And I like going to workshops and writing in them, and it just comes naturally in that setting to write short books.
So just to follow up, did you start in another genre or area type of thing?
My first work was writing a novel at the age of 12, 13. So I've been writing for a long time. But yes, I like the short fiction just because I can wrap my head around it a lot faster, and I can keep the whole thing in my head. That's why I like it. Any other questions? Yes?
If you are looking to get flash fiction published, is there specific subjects that are better to pick than others?
It doesn't matter. You can pick anything because you're not going to get this published in like HarperCollins because they don't do flash fiction, but there's hundreds and thousands of literary journals across the world that will publish flash fiction. One of them is Microfiction Monday, which I mentioned that I got published in. There's a couple other, if you just type in where can I publish flash fiction or where can you read it, you'll just find a bunch of places. And whatever you write your genre in, there'll be a place you can publish it that looks at that type of genre or that type of story. So there may only be a certain subset that like that and certain ones that don't, but you just find the ones that are gonna work with that genre. Yes.
Some of these were not, or I don't think any of them were fiction. They were actual stories. So why do they call it flash fiction if you may have other prompts that are not fiction?
It would just be flash nonfiction.
Flash what?
Nonfiction. The difference between fiction and nonfiction is one's true, one's maybe not true.
Sure.
Anita, you had a question?
It got answered.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else have questions? Yes.
I just Googled Microfiction Monday magazine, they're going out of business.
Oh no!
So go there.
We gotta start.
If you don't,
We're not responsible for that.
we're not, no. If you don't, or if you're mostly dealing with novel publishing, if you don't know, Duotrope is an excellent tool. It lists a lot of literary magazines for poetry, nonfiction, and fiction. You can search by those 3 types. You can also search by genre, fantasy, sci-fi, romance, all different genres you can look into. And they'll list you all the journals that accept that type of publication. It gets very granular. So if you have specific things that you write, you can go to Duotrope. It's I think $50 a year to get. And if that's a lot, you can maybe pair up with a couple people, split the cost for the year, and use the same login.
What's it called again?
Duotrope, D-U-O-T-R-O-P-E. It's a fantastic tool for publishing your shorter works. Yes?
When you do your open mics, do you do only poetry, or can you do flash fiction at them? Do you do flash fiction, or what's?
I usually do poetry because it's a little bit shorter, and usually at open mics you only have 5 minutes. So sometimes I'll do flash fiction, but usually I just do poetry because I enjoy reading that a little bit more sometimes than the flash fiction, because with the poetry, you can get a little bit more of the emotionality sometimes. In the fiction, sometimes it's really hard to keep track of longer pieces for the audience, so I try to keep that in mind.
Would you do microfiction there?
I only have that one piece, and it's, so I might do more, but yeah, sometimes. Sometimes I read it. Any other questions? Well, we got about 12 minutes left, so I think the last 12 minutes we should spend is maybe reading some of your pieces in groups and having discussions, and I'll kind of walk around the room and kind of check in with everybody if that sounds good.